before I get started here, I put a green glass of water there on that back white table. Can somebody grab that for me? Well, thanks, Ed. Well, hold on. I just want to present you for your faithful service in bringing me a cup when I desperately needed the water. This check for you for $100,000. Here you go. Now the catch is you have to get Donnell to sign this. Good luck. Now, who wants to give me some coffee?
I will.
Do you know you can just make those checks? That's great. Got my retirement plan solved. Imagine if we actually did that. How would that change your attitude towards serving? I mean, for one, when we dismiss people for children's church, everybody would go downstairs to help. And secondly, I think most of you would then feel guilty, like, man, why am I really doing this? Am I doing it for the right reason? So today we're continuing through the Sermon on the Mount, or Matthew chapter 6, verse 19. Jesus says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness?" So he says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal." So he says, treasures here on earth are temporary. And so I think you ought to give your treasure to me. I'll keep it for you. But if you look back, and this is why I love preaching through Scripture like this, because he has repeated this 3 times in the preceding verses about prayer, about fasting, and about giving. That when they do it for the wrong attitude, they have received their reward. They have received their reward. They have already received their reward. Don't let your rewards be things that you receive here on earth. And in particular, what he's been going through, what people were doing is they're doing stuff for attention. And of all the rewards you could possibly get, the attention of people is the most worthless. The most fleeting of all things you could possibly have. We have these people whose jobs it is to be famous. We call them influencers. And ask them what it feels like when you have 1 million strangers give vague approval to a picture you posted. What do they want? 1,000,001 people the next time. Within minutes of that post, they are already dissatisfied with the applause of the crowds. Their attention is so fleeting. But Jesus here, he's referring to actual physical investments, because he says, moths will break that stuff down. They'll chew holes in your clothing, and thieves will break in and steal it, and rust will decay it. He says, that stuff is only temporary, right? So people, we lay up money for retirement, and yet we don't know what's going to happen to that money. In Germany, after World War I, they had such bad inflation that their paper money that they had put their life savings into became so worthless that kids would use it as building blocks to make toy houses out of. Sarah and I said, okay, well, we want to diversify our plans for retirement, and so we have this house in North Carolina, and so some 20 years from now, 30 years, okay, that'll be one of the things that helps us in retirement. And then we watched the news last year is floodwaters rise in North Carolina, and we see that weather guy show up in our hometown, and understanding, well, a flood could carry it all away. So, well, I'm not gonna trust in things so fleeting as paper money or houses and property. I'm going to invest in Bitcoin. Except a few months ago, hackers broke in to a Bitcoin database and stole $40 million worth of it earlier this year. So I'm not going to have my treasure in money even like that. You understand, mothers, that your kids will one day leave the nest? Don't say yes. If you put your treasure in them, one day you're only going to get occasional phone calls. You hope. Men and women, you have a career, your work will one day come to an end. Your career and everything you've built on that, there is a lifespan to it, and it will one day stop. I'll be honest, I've been struggling past 2 weeks after I read this article that pointed out that like every study out there shows that I, at the age of 32, have already hit peak creativity. I'm already on the decline. It's all downhill from here. It's going to get boring. Your health 1 year. Your health eventually will leave you. And see, this is the problem with people who preach what we call a prosperity gospel and tell you, well, God just wants to make you healthy and rich and prosperous and successful in all that you do, because they're attaching people's hearts to treasure that will fade. It's not going to last forever. To have your treasure here on earth is to live in constant anxiety, knowing that it can and will be taken from you one day. I listened to a lot of weird music, and one of my favorite songs as a teenager was about an ice cube that this guy had named Mary, and he said, I held her in my hands, and no matter how tightly I gripped her, she just slipped away. You understand that's going to happen with all your stuff, right? You say, well, that's silly. But when all is said and done in your life, what will you be left with? In the 1600s, tulips were very popular in the Netherlands. And the Dutch, when they were growing them, they became obsessed with them. Now, tulips, if you've ever grown them, they only blossom 1 week out of the year. And they're difficult plants to grow. And the most valuable strains were actually afflicted with a virus that gave them like pretty cool stripy patterns on them. And in 1636, something changed in the sale of tulips. People began to trade slips of paper that gave you the rights to a tulip bulb that somebody else had. So a farmer had a tulip bulb, he would sell you a slip of paper that said that tulip belonged to you. And then you could take that slip of paper and sell it to somebody else for a little bit more. And they sold it to somebody else for a little bit more. And this just got out of control. So that some people were trading the equivalent of hundreds of thousands of dollars for a flower. Actually, not just a flower, a bulb that would next year hopefully become a flower. And not just a bulb, a slip of paper that gives you the rights to a bulb that could next year hopefully become a flower. You know what happened, right? Within 1 year, all of a sudden, you see that graph there? It's the price of tulips in the Netherlands. Within 6 weeks, it's like a 98% decline in the price of tulips. And so you understand, at the end of this, there were people who were holding a slip of paper that they had given their life savings for, and it's worthless. Do you understand that in the last day, every single thing that you own will become like that? You laugh at the fool who spent so much on what was inherently worthless and then turn around and spend our lives on things that only last a little bit longer. Many will arrive at the gates of heaven, having left their treasure behind here on earth. So Jesus says, lay up for yourselves treasure in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. So Jesus, again, in the preceding verses before, he reminds them again and again, don't let your treasures be here. Don't let your rewards be the attention of other people. And 3 times again, he tells them, your Father will reward you. Your Father will reward you. Your Father will reward you. And fasting and praying and giving, all of these things will be recognized on the last day. And that promise lies in the future. Now, Jesus, though, this is so important, especially for dedicated followers of Christ. Jesus could have said, don't just give money for the reward of the attention you get. Give money without thinking of any kind of reward, just because it's the right thing to do. He could have said that, but he didn't. He doesn't say, just do the right thing without any thought for what you might get in return. Instead, what he does, he sets up a contrast between the lesser reward and the greater reward. And sometimes we have a hard time with that in the church. Right? Because we have this idea of altruism and our motives, and we have this thought that if I do anything for any motive other than it is the right thing to do, then I have a corrupt intent. But the truth is that when we make decisions, when we do things, we have complicated reasons for doing so. Then think about parenting. Parenting is rewarding. Watching your kids do well in school or in sports or not be a little jerk to other kids, that is rewarding. So we wouldn't tell parents, no, don't think of your kids doing well in the future. In fact, Sarah and I are constantly telling each other this. When we have to discipline our kids or do the hard things in parenting, you know what we're telling each other? It's going to be worth it. It's going to be worth it someday. Now, we can imagine if somebody attaches too much value to that. If you're parenting only because you want your kid to have the success in sports that you never had, and that's the whole sum of your parenting, yes, that is, you're going to crush your kid. But the truth is, I love my kids and I want the best for them. But it is also something that I look forward to, the pleasure and the satisfaction of some kind of payoff in the future. So here's the thing. As followers of Jesus, I do the right thing because I love God. Because God has forgiven me my sins, that he shows me grace. That is the dominant reason I'm doing anything. But I am also told again and again and again to aim at the rewards that God has promised. Here's an example, Luke 6:35. Similar to the Sermon on the Mount. But love your enemies and do good and lend, expecting nothing in return. And your reward will be great, and you'll be sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. I love this. Do you understand that Jesus is leading you in a direction of lending money to your enemies when they're ungrateful for it? What a crazy way to end an argument. The next time you feel tempted to physically assault somebody, why don't you pause the fight, pull out your wallet and say, oh yeah? Well, do you need to borrow $100, man? No, don't worry about paying me back. Here! Take that. You will leave that person shaking their head for the rest of their life. Difficulty level, pretty hard, right? And so there's a few factors here that Jesus said should motivate us to do insane stuff like that. One, we're to be imitators of God. This is the kind of grace that God shows to evil people. Two, this is the kind of grace that God has shown to me when I was ungrateful and evil. When I continue to this day to be ungrateful and evil, God is so gracious to me. But he also says, what else? Love your enemies, and your reward will be great. It does change how you feel in the moment about it. I will be repaid for what I'm doing when it's hard. Here's another example, Luke 14. Jesus is at a banquet. He said also to the man who had invited him, when you give a dinner or a banquet, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors, lest they also invite you in return and you be repaid. Again, there's that concept of not choosing fleeting rewards here on earth. But when you give a feast, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed because they cannot repay you. And here's the important part. For you will be repaid at the resurrection of the just. So we're to do these things we're to intentionally seek out situations that people can't pay us back, that people are undeserving. Because when we do those things mindful of God and for His sake, I am looking forward to getting paid. Now, you got to remember when you're getting paid. Have you ever had a confusion at work about when you're supposed to get your paycheck and a misunderstanding there? That is never a fun time. And what I see is so often Christians go through life acting as though God promises to reward us now with wealth and success and an absence of suffering in life. When in fact Jesus promises the opposite. He says, those who follow me, you've got to be ready to suffer. Now, your payment comes at the resurrection of the just. That is the day that I'm looking forward to. So we're told to keep that in mind when things get difficult. So what kind of treasure is this going to be? I mean, I'm looking forward to some kind of reward, but, again, if you've ever had that experience as a kid, I remember, I think it was a church activity or something all right, the winning team, gets a reward. It was something lame, like an eraser or something like that. And I was like, man, we worked all week for this. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. Now, the truth is, the Bible's kind of vague about exactly what God is going to reward us with. In fact, in 1 Corinthians, Paul writes that what no eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor the heart of man imagined is what God has prepared for those who love Him. And yet we're told here that whatever it is, whatever it looks like, it is something that will last forever. It's imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, 1 Peter. We're also told that there's a sense of proportion to it. In Matthew 19:29, Jesus says, and everyone who has left houses, or brothers, or sisters, or father, or mother, or children, or lands for my name's sake, will receive 100-fold and will inherit eternal life. So you might read that and think, well, great, all I've got to do is divorce my wife, and then I get 100 of them in heaven. It doesn't work like that. One, it says, if you give these things up for the sake of God, there are people who have come to Christ and have lost their spouse. There are people who have come to Christ and alienated their family. Go to a Muslim-majority country and ask them about that. There's a sense of proportion that when we sacrifice things for the sake of the kingdom of God, that we're repaid in a way that matches what we give up. Not just matches, 100-fold greater. So we ask you today, where is your treasure? Because Jesus says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. You show me somebody's life, and I will easily tell you where their treasure is, what is most valuable to their heart. It will affect your behavior. Otherwise, bribes wouldn't work. I was having a conversation with one of the students. We had the pie in the face thing. We talk about how rewards can motivate people. I was trying to talk these kids into for $1 you can throw a pie in their face. It was like, well, hey kids, we got to upsell people. Let's do $20 paintball gun shots, right? You could really. And I was talking to one of the kids. I was like, well, how much would it take for you to let that other kid hit you in the face with a brick? And we actually sat there and had a conversation. He put the price tag somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000. See, where your treasure is will affect your behavior. No normal person under any circumstance would be like, oh yeah, just hit me in the face with a brick. But apparently, if you give teenagers enough money, they'll do it. So let me tell you, I'm not messing around in the way that I live my life. I am intentionally living my life with this in mind. And my brother's a financial advisor, and it's one of those things they tell you, if your employer gives you matching contributions when you put money into retirement, if you put $100 in, they'll put $100 in too. They tell you every time, maximize that. This is like free money. Put as much as you can, as much as will match. And if your employer was actually giving you 100 times more than you put in, you'd be well advised to do everything you can to put everything towards that. And that's how I'm living. I'm not living my life for retirement. It's going to be fleeting. Living my life for what's going to happen on the final day when I stand before Christ. So along those lines, there's this amazing Instagram account called Preachers in Sneakers. And it is super simple. It's just a collection of pictures of well-known pastors of large churches. And these pastors of large churches like to take pictures of themselves. And they take pictures of themselves wearing very expensive shoes. So in this picture, this guy takes a picture of himself wearing what I think are really hideous shoes. But he also posts with that how much these shoes cost. And those particular shoes cost $950. And what's amazing about this picture, you can't really see it on the screen, in the background, there is a homeless dude with no shoes. Pastor in the front, flexing $950 ugly shoes, homeless guy in the background. Where's his treasure? Man, you put that junk on your feet. You walk on that. Now look, I'm not saying that, you should only pay pastors so much, or let's start criticizing ministers, for if we think they're, going on vacation or anything like that. But here's the thing. You've got to think about what the decisions that you make in your life are saying about where your treasure is. And somebody who's dropping, some of these dudes, it's like $3,000 on a briefcase or $5,000 for a shirt. And when you're doing that, you are not maximizing your investment in heaven. Not in the least. Just in case you're wondering, right now I'm rocking a pair of off-brand shoes that I bought on clearance. Wearing out on the bottom. Because I don't want to walk on my treasure. So where is your heart? Hebrews 11 reminds us of Moses. By faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. How is it that he could give up the privilege and the status afforded to him as part of the royal family and choose intentionally to associate himself with a race of slaves? Here's how. He considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. Moses, in his life, he put on the scales everything that Egypt, the most prosperous, powerful empire on earth at the time, everything they could offer him. On the other side, he put Christ. Yet upon the promise given to the people of God that he would save them. He said, well, that's what I'm going to go with. So when we say no to temptation, when we struggle with temptation, so often, I talk to people and they're like, oh, I've got this sin in my life and I just don't want to give it up. I mean, it's so hard, it's so personal, it's so deeply ingrained in my life. Don't you realize the cost that giving up this sin would bring on me? And so many times it's not even like, oh, you've got to learn to think of that sin as somehow less. It's not like Moses was sitting there trying to tell himself, Egypt doesn't really have that much money. They did. It's you've got to see Christ as more valuable. It will outweigh anything that this fleeting life can offer you. Jesus says, the eye is the lamp of the body. Now, in the ancient world, he uses kind of a way of thinking about the eye. They actually viewed the eye as kind of like a lamp that would actually shine the light out, and then you could see stuff. But he says, so if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? Let me ask you, what guides your decisions? When you sit down and make your budget as a family, when you make calls about how you spend your time. I'm not just talking about what you choose to do on a Sunday morning. I'm talking about how you spend your time at work, how you treat your family, the way you act towards your neighbors, what guides your decision. What are your eyes focused on? What is informing you? What do you see the world through? Because if you see the world through what you can get for yourself here, you will be filled with darkness. So Colossians 3:23-24 says this: whatever you do, work heartily, as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. He wrote that to slaves specifically. How much more does it apply to those of you in the workplace? Look, I've been there. All right, absolutely insane boss, close to minimum wage. Your body hurts every morning and every night. You're tired. You have no hope of advancement, no hope for the future. But I was serving Christ there. And so I worked heartily. I did my best because I knew that one day, even if I wasn't paid for it here, I would get a reward. If we live like this, your life will be filled with joy. Not just dragging ourselves through because I've got to do this, it's the right thing. But joy. When I was like Christine's age, my dad was building something in the backyard. And he had a stack of lumber. And it had, those annoying tags like stapled on the end of every single one of them. Some of them on both ends. And so my dad said, Aaron, I want you to go and I want you to pull these tags off. Now, I love my dad. I would have obeyed him because that's what he told me to do. But my dad also said, and son, for every yellow tag you bring me, I'll give you a dime. For every orange one, I'll give you a quarter. Oh man! All of a sudden, I'm running out, checking both ends of the wood, and I'm collecting these, and the whole time I'm man, I don't know what my dad wants these for. I'm pretty sure these are worthless. I don't know if my dad knows that, but I'm not going to say anything because he's giving me money for this. I worked fast and thoroughly and with excitement because I was doing something small, and what I was getting in return was far greater than anything I put into it. That is the kind of life that God wants us to live. And sometimes it's going to be way harder than pulling stickers off a piece of wood. Those of you who are caring for somebody with a long-term illness, it's not pulling stickers off wood anymore. But neither is your reward. Those of you who have somebody in your life that is just continually, intentionally evil towards you, would you bear up with them? Continually do the difficult work of forgiveness, even as you draw boundaries, you forgive them. God promises a greater joy. Those of you who serve in the little ways around this church, somebody went out and mowed the grass. I was just getting back from the hospital this past week. I don't know who did it, but your reward will last forever, way longer than the cut grass will last. So that's my prayer for you this morning. I want your life to look like that your eyes would just be turned to what God has promised. Let's pray. And I pray that you would fill us, one, with gratitude for your grace and understanding that we have been forgiven and what that means, but also, and especially when it is difficult, that we would remember that this will one day be worth it. Even though we get just a taste of that here in this life, I pray that in everything we do, we would fix our hearts on that. In Jesus' name, amen.